Hi, this is Melanie of Pardesi Reviews. This is part 3 of my discussion with Harsha and Katherine of the Polandine Patti podcast. We're talking about the best Malayalam films of the 2022 year. And we had part 1, we talked about Archana, 31 Not Out, and 19-1A. In part 2, we talk about 2 of Mammootty's films, Pola and Bhishma Parvam. Now, in part 3, we have several films that we cram in. Member Rameshan, Ninth Ward. We have Jaya, 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 Hey, Pryan Ottathilanu, and Oruthee and Na Tan Case Kodu. So if you missed part 1 and 2, see the links in the doobly-doo.
All right. So then, Harsha, you were going to tell us about your next top film.
Yeah, my next one is, once again, we're back to the feel-good category, Malayalam cinema's favorite. It's Member Rameshan, Ombadam Ward, which is 9th Ward. Arjun Ashokan, who is Harishri Ashokan's son, plays a painter. He just goes and paints, and he plays cricket. He's got a girl who lives next door, who his family, even though she's Christian and he's Hindu, there's no issues between the families of them getting married. He's basically, got his life together. He's got good friends until he gets nominated for the party, one of the local parties to be the ward member for the local panchayat, which is like the town council. And that's, at first he's like, oh my God, I'm like a big man in town. I get to wear, nice clothes and be invited to everything. And then he realizes that, he basically doesn't get paid enough compared to his painting job. And so he can't support his family, and he doesn't really have any power because the party controls him. And so it's basically a lot of hijinks about how this young person who gets into politics gets jaded by the politics, and how he decides that, maybe this isn't it for me, and he goes back to his painting job. And it's got, once again, a lot of gadfly characters, and Shabari Sharma, who was in Premam, who played one of Niven Pauly's friends, he plays the main character, Rameshan's best friend. They're always joking around. They're always getting up to no good, and everybody seems to love them. And it's there's a little bit of conflict, but not a whole lot going on in this film, and everything gets sorted out by the end. Except for the fact that, politics in India is still not something that, honorable people do. And that's kind of the message of the film. The film ends with a note about how poorly paid ward members are, and the fact that it doesn't allow people to support their families on that income. And so that makes politicians turn to corruption and bribery as a way to make ends meet. So that we need, it's sort of a call to action to increase the pay of public servants. So it's a very well-meaning film. It's got a lot of humor to it. Chemban Vinod plays this, sort of one of the local town characters who's also a politician, and he's got a lot of great lines. There's some laugh out loud lines that in this film that I kept rewinding and watching it, and it was almost midnight when I was watching it, and my partner and the dog were asleep, and every time I kept cracking up, they would wake up to look at me. So it was just a really fun film, with an important message at the end. And if you end up liking this film, I recommend Velimunga, starring Biju Menon. Also small town politician film, with Indian Pranaya Kadha, also small town politician film. And both those characters are very different than Rameshan. if you enjoy, the sort of a small town group of friends doing stuff, check out both Premam and Nivin Pauli's Tattathin Malayatha.
Very good. Katherine, you're up next.
Well, I'm going to go back to film. We were talking about this film earlier, Jaya, 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 Jaya Hey, directed by Vipin Das. Again, another one that I managed to see in theaters, and it's coming to streaming. It'll be on Hotstar on December 22nd. So, people will have more of a chance. One of the things I said to you guys was that every time I sort of started gushing about this film and then explaining what it was about, I would see people's face suddenly, become horrified. Because essentially this is a film about Jaya, played by Darshana Rajendran. I keep thinking of this film as like if Om Shanti Oshana and the Great Indian Kitchen had a love child, it would be this film. The opening reminds me very much of Om Shanti Oshana, where you have the birth of the girl, and everyone is like, "Oh no, a girl! Oh no, a girl!" But the father, in particular, is thrilled that he has a daughter. And Jaya 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 Hey opens very much in the same way about the birth of this girl and talk about how she's going to have all these opportunities in life and this and that, but her life ends up very controlled by her parents, and she's never given an opportunity to make choices about what she wants in life. She wants to go on and have further her education, and her parents don't see the point. But for her brother, like, he comes first, everything comes first. They pay for him to go to a good school, and she literally has like no agency. There's a point early on in the film where she's studying like at a local school, and one of the teachers is played by Aju Varghese. And in class, he's spouting all of these dialogues about, sort of emancipation of women and equality of women and this and that. And she's like thrilled by this message. You can just see it. And the two of them end up dating. And he is not in real life. He's very controlling. He insists on, she like very much like her family in some ways. But her family ends up, really upset when they discover that she's had this relationship, and they decide, okay, this is it. We have to marry her off. So they arrange her marriage to a poultry farmer, Rajesh, played by Basil Joseph. And I think that's a really clever bit of casting, because in much of what we've seen him in, you mentioned he directed Minal Murali last year. He's been like, I've lost count of the number of films he's in this year.
Yes.
But, he's a small man. He's sort of, not glamorous, very quiet, sort of unassuming characters. So you're presented with this, except his Rajesh is controlling and has problems with anger. He has to eat exactly the same thing every day. And, when she wants to make something and she's looking things up on YouTube, she's always looking at things up on YouTube on how to learn things. And she's trying out these fabulous meals, and he'll like throw them off the table. So there's the first indication that maybe things are not good here. He's always bitter and angry. And then comes the day where he slaps her. And this is the moment where I see people's faces going, because this is a comedy. And the film uses its comedy, I think, very well to both highlight this abusive situation and also to give us some respite from the abusive situation. And essentially, this film is about how does this young woman who's never been granted any agency in her life find her own agency and deal with this situation, because she gets no support from anyone. Everyone assumes that she is the problem. Her parents tell her she needs to adjust. How she learns to adjust is treated very comically in some ways, because we've been set up to understand that, she learns things from YouTube. She learns self-defense off YouTube. But she's also really smart. And there will be things dropped throughout the film that will be very important to how Jaya's story plays out and how the film ends. So I want to, this is one of these little films that just blew up at the box office. Again, I saw it in cinema. It's very rare for films to come anywhere near me, and it played like 15 minutes from home. It played for a month in our local cinema here. I think it's probably sitting, 8th or 9th at the box office right far and coming to streaming. So I want people to kind of be prepared when they go in for this film that it's going to treat a very serious subject in a way that's going to seem very lighthearted, but it never wavers from this idea that this young woman needs to learn how to take control of her life and how she does it. As someone, I don't talk about this much, but my first marriage was very much like this one. And I found dealing with it in a way that was humorous really helped me to be able to sit with this subject matter. And like literally at points in this film, people are cheering for this young woman, which I think,
I do think sometimes maybe I would call it a darker comedy can deal with subject matter and also get in the door the people that really need to see and hear this kind of story, right? And really see that other perspective. And you're right, like it can give it. I'm looking forward to seeing this film now that it's coming on streaming. Looking forward to seeing Basil Joseph in another more larger role. But I do think sometimes it can seem callous to have a comedy about something serious, but yet can really sometimes get the message through where a more serious drama maybe won't let the audience watching really absorb the message kind of in the same way. So did you have a chance to see this one, Harsha, or?
No, not
I'm looking. This is one I'm definitely looking forward. I missed in theaters, and I'm looking forward to seeing this when it comes on streaming and just short at the end of this month. Very good.
And for places to go after this, I've mentioned Great Indian Kitchen and I mentioned Om Shanti Oshana, but for two other films this year, maybe Hridayam, directed by Vineeth Sreenivasan, which has Darshana Rajendra in it. It's another top-grossing film, and quite honestly, I didn't like it. But it's a coming of age kind of film that Vineeth Sreenivasan is known for, and I think it touched a chord in people who love that about some of his films. The other one is Vipin Das actually had two films this year, and the other one is Antakshari with Sajid Kaurab as a circle inspector who loves the game Antakshari, which is essentially like you sing a song and then the last word of the line you take as the first word of the next line. And it sets up a situation with a serial killer and a very complex series of serial killings that he starts investigating. What I have learned is that it was actually pitched as a series and nobody went for it. So they turned it into a film. I think it actually would have worked a little better as a series because the serial murders are very complicated in how they're connected. And I think giving it a little more space over a number of episodes would have allowed them to make those connections better because it happens kind of fast in the film.
Yeah.
But I still think it was quite an interesting approach. And there were a lot of like serial killer films this year. And I thought it was like a little bit different and very much, very much a different film from Vipin Das.
All right, Harsha. I've lost track if we're on number 3 or number 4 for everybody. Are we on your last one or your
this would be my last one.
Okay.
I recommend Pryan Ottathilanu, which for our non-Malayalam speakers means Priyan on the Run.
I just saw last night.
It
recommended it.
It's about a guy who is so over. It's a little bit like, remember Rameshan Ombadam Ward, but it's this, this is a person who's a little bit later in his life, and he's completely not changed his ways. He's so dedicated to other people's problems that he's not had time to focus on his own. And the characters in this, I just found so relatable. I was watching it in my home, and I stopped it and I went over to my parents. I was like, you guys need to watch this, because I felt like, there are people in our family that we could compare each of, the Priyan character to, and his cousin character to. His cousin is kind of his cousin is one of the people Priyan has to get out of trouble constantly. But at the same time, this man is very clear-headed in the most inopportune moments. Like he's like talking about feminism in a time when when there's problems in a marriage, and he's like, you got to walk away from all this. This is not worth fighting for. And so it's all carried by the fact that Sharif Udin is such a charming lead. He can do so much, and he's one of these sort of side character role actors who came through in the mid 2010s in Malayalam cinema, who shockingly can also really carry a film exceptionally well, and he's proven that over and over again. In one of the other films I recommended, Om Shanti Oshana, he literally just plays a marriage broker, and he, even in those films, I really did enjoy his brief appearances. So definitely check this out if you again, another heartwarming kind of film where somebody's just trying to do his best, and he comes across all these obstacles.
I definitely felt like he was very ADHD.
Yes, I think there's a little bit of that too.
And I could definitely relate, because I have that myself, that it's just, he's constantly distracted, but he also kind of thrives on that distraction. He has written a script, and at one point he explains to someone, I can't just sit in a room and write. I get the ideas from days like today when I'm just going from one thing to the next. And I totally related to that, how he can't just sit down and work. He has to be constantly, but he also, to his detriment, like we learned that he had forgotten to pay the school fees for his daughter. Like, he's taking care of everyone, but also things are falling through the cracks because he's so constantly distracted by the next person who has asked him for help. But I had some frustrations in that, I don't know, maybe a little bit before the halfway mark. I'm like, where is this movie going? Right? Yeah. It just feels so chaotic, but yet that is what his life is and what he thrives on. He thrives on the chaos. He thrives on helping everyone. And you see the exasperation of his wife, who like, why can't you make me and your daughter the priority? But then when we come to the end, you can see the love in her eyes of like, I wouldn't want to be with anyone else, because what I love about you is that you do care for everyone. He does come through. She just lets it go, that he didn't pay the school fee. She just deals with that. But you can see that, she's really touched with the way that she helps out one of her family members, that he did come through for her. But she says, he wouldn't be the man I married, the man I love, if he didn't cater to his parents the way he does and help out all of these relatives, even if she's exasperated because that crazy cousin is sleeping on their floor. Oh my God, that cousin character. Oh, Katherine, did you have a chance to see this film?
Oh yeah, I was actually really glad, because I had been putting it on the list, taking off the list, putting on a list, taking off the list. So I was really glad when Harsha decided that she would talk about it. I love Sharif Udin. I love him. I love him. I love him. She's mentioned a couple of their films, like, I wish I could remember the name of it. He's in another film this year about a family that's like completely bizarre, and he plays this very boho guy who's off to Goa, and it's hysterically funny.
Is it Patrosinde Padapuga?
Yes. Yeah. again, doing something a little different that I wouldn't have expected from him, and he's just so funny.
Yeah.
So if I were going to take on some more recommendations after this Halal love story, where he plays Tawfiq, who's asked to write a script for a Muslim religious organization that wants to make a halal film. Again, a little role, but very endearing.
Yeah.
Something completely different, Aarkkariyam from last year, where he plays Roy, the husband of Parvati's character, and the son-in-law of Biju Menon's character. And there's an incredibly terrible revelation that his father-in-law makes to him, and he has to cope with what he knows and how he sort of sorts it all through in his head. Really excellent. He's also had a film come out this year called 1744 White Alto, directed by Senna Hegde, which hasn't come to streaming yet. It's been just out, and he has a lead in that, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
He's got a much shorter filmography than a lot of the actors we're talking about, but I did enjoy his performance in Anjaam Pathiraa a lot. He really plays against type in that film. And, if you generally like the kind of, a good person is my lean convenience type of films that I've kind of talked about, I also recommend Sundari Gardens from this year, which is just very sweet film, and not a saccharine film, because there's definitely been some saccharine films in the list that I looked at this year as well. So
yeah, it's lovely.
Yes, it is.
And what the other thing that I loved about this film was the presence of Mammootty. You kind of wonder through the whole film if he will actually do a little cameo, but it's just, it's again so grounded in Malayalam cinema. Of course, that the guy that's willing to finance it, it's the only reason is so he can get a picture finally with Mammootty. It's just, I just love that whole thread through the whole film. All right, Katherine, I think you're our last recommended film.
I actually have two left.
Okay.
Let's touch briefly on Oruthee, because I know you watched it, and I wanted to mention this because it stars
Navya Nair.
Thank you. We've been here a while. It stars Navya Nair. It's her first Malayalam film in about 10 years or so. She was actually in the Kannada remakes of Drishyam and Drishyam 2.
Oh, okay.
But it's been a long time since she's been in a film. It's about a woman whose daughter comes down with food poisoning, and in order to pay the hospital bill, she plans to pledge a gold chain they've bought for the daughter. Her husband's in the Gulf.
Yeah.
And she's managing everything.
Yeah.
But when she goes to the bank to pledge the chain, they discover that the chain is actually underweight. It's gold stuffed with wax.
Yeah.
And then the whole film devolves into, how does she stand up for herself against this very reputable jewelry business who treat her as if she's a fraud and she's crazy.
Yeah.
And the film is so frenetic.
Oh my gosh.
She's constantly on the run.
I have seen serial killer movies. I have seen thrillers. I have seen spy movies this year. There was no movie that I was more filled with tension than this film. Like, I was so invested in her and her plight and all the calamities that befall her. I literally had to kind of pause the film and take breaks because I was watching it at home on streaming this week.
Yeah.
It was so filled with tension.
It is, and she's so good.
She's
the film
amazing.
Focuses squarely on her. She does get an assist from a police officer played by Vineeth.
Yeah.
But he's not there to rescue her. He's there to help her.
Right.
And I think it was such a pleasure to see her back on screen, and to see her fully in a role and letting them focus on her, and the moments like her tenderness with her children amidst all of this sort of frenetic thing that's going on in her life and how she has to juggle everything.
Yeah.
It was really lovely to see her back on screen. So for further recommendations, I'm going to recommend Nandanam, which is a very early film in her career, and it's one we've talked about on the podcast. And it's almost as if in some ways the character in Oruthee is like the much older version of the character in that film, because we have, there's segments where they're doing, the dancing that's very similar to what she did in that film, but and her sort of devotion to Lord Krishna and all of this. So I think they were definitely echoing some of those things. But we've talked about the fact that that film is an early Prithviraj film as well, but it's wholly her film. Really,
I'm glad you recommended, because this was actually my first film seeing her, and I was blown away. So I'm looking forward to seeing now that earlier film.
Yeah. She also did another film called Saira, which is a very early Dr. Biju film. Now, if you wondered why I loved 1901A in a very meditative, contemplative film, Dr. Biju is also that kind of director. But it's again a film where she plays a journalist at the early stages of her career, and it kind of explores what happens to her after having some interviews with some very controversial figures. And an interesting role for her there as well.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Harsha.
This is directed by VK Prakash, who's a very prolific Malayalam film director. He just churns them out, and they're all of surprisingly high quality, considering how many he makes. So, and he's had other films where he tries to bring some of the actresses who've been retired because they got married back into films. And I think he's definitely somebody whose other films I recommend.
Yeah, I didn't know the backstory. Like I said, this was my first time seeing this particular actress, and I was blown away, because definitely, the lion's share of this movie is on her shoulders to carry the performance and be on screen almost all the time. Yes, Vinayakan plays this officer who has the supporting role, but it is her movie completely. As you said, her husband, it's just phone calls that we're seeing. They're never on screen together because he's in the Gulf, and she's juggling so many things in her family. I was really, this is a film that I was really taken with. I was glad that you mentioned it, and that because I definitely want to see more with this actress, because she was amazing. And it's so wonderful that she did come back to the screen. So
yeah, it was such a pleasure seeing her. So the last film I'm going to talk about today is Nathan Case Kodu. Another one of these little films that blew up at the box office, not without some problematic elements, which we can discuss. But another one of the reasons I wanted to mention it, because it's Kunjako Boban, who I also adore. And on the podcast, we've talked about, how the fact that his career started very much with sort of romance films. Harsha, you've talked about members of your family who were just blown away by him. Very romantic films, and he had kind of a reputation as the chocolate boy, and that gets old after a time. And he very purposefully took a step back from films for several years. And when he came back, he was really trying, I think, to reinvent himself and to try moving in new directions and age himself into new directions. And I've very much appreciated how he's managed his career. He's also started, producing films.
This particular film was from his production company as well.
And he's revived his family, because he comes from a star family. He's revived his family's production company as well in doing this. But it's, Harsha and I watched the trailer together, and we do have some concerns about, I don't want to call it full on brown face, but he's much more tanned than he normally would be, and it's makeup. Now, Harsha, your comment was, if he spent a lot of time out in the sun, he might be that color.
He could be that color, but I found the coloring also inconsistent in the makeup. So he was different shades of darker skinned throughout the film. I did find it distracting, to be honest.
It is. And
he used some sort of prosthetic or something.
He has a prosthetic teeth in the lower.
That really distracted me as well. Because every time he was doing the lower bite acting, I was like,
So there are some issues around this film. On the other hand, I kind of appreciate an actor who is really trying to disappear into a role, whether we find it successful or not. But he plays a man who was a petty thief, who ends up living with this woman and her father, and he looks after the father has fallen in a well, and he helps look after him, and they're living together. And he goes to a temple festival one evening, and he ends up jumping into the yard of one of the local MLAs and being bit by the dogs. This is a running thing throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
And they accuse him of theft. And the whole film is him going to court, trying to argue that he wasn't there to steal. They're accusing him based on, the fact that, well, yes, he was a thief at one point, but he has stopped doing that.
Right.
And eventually it comes down to the reason for all of this is that the pothole in the road caused this truck to swerve out of the way. There was a cyclist. There was an auto that almost slammed into him, which is why he jumped over the wall. So it peels it back to the fact that he goes after the public works minister for not doing his job properly, creating the pothole in the road that led to this whole situation that had him be accused of theft. So much of this film is spent in a courtroom, and it's these very eccentric characters. The pigeons that are up in the window, and it's incredibly funny. It really is. Some of these the lawyers who are in the film are actually played by lawyers. They're not actors.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
The man who plays the magistrate is called Pipi Kunikrishnan.
Mm-hmm.
This is his first film.
No, you're kidding. Oh my gosh.
He's a retired Hindi teacher.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So good.
He's so good.
And again, like Harsha has talked about like all the little characters, and I think that's another one of these films that's what you have, you have the rickshaw driver and his girlfriend, and because they don't, want people to kind of know and disapprove of their relationship, he just drives her around in his rickshaw and they sing. There are all sorts of little characters like that.
Each witness that is brought in is just another character that the biker with his tattoos and all of it. Yeah.
The biker, there are actually 3 directors in this film. Ritesh Balakrishnan Podawal, who directed this film, has a tiny role as a news reporter.
Okay.
Mridul Nair, also a director, plays the biker. And then we have Basil Joseph.
Because we know magistrate,
we know that the magistrate is going to retire, and this court case takes so long that at the end we have a new magistrate, and at the end we're also in the middle of COVID, so everyone is masked.
Got their masks,
just an amazing supporting cast, lots of little characters, lots of little interesting details. However we feel about Kunchako Bobin's appearance in this film, he at least is the center around which all of this manages to happen and be very entertaining.
And the woman that plays his live-in lover, I think the actress's name is Gayatri. I thought she was fantastic too.
She was so funny.
She was really good. But I had a feeling, it's a political satire, and I had a feeling that there were layers of probably allusions to real life people and real life events that were going over my head. But you don't need all of that extra to still enjoy the film. I'm just sure for a Kerala audience, there were other layers of laughter that I was missing, but I still enjoyed the film very much. Go ahead,
Harsha.
Harsha.
One of the comedic elements of the film is the dialect in which they speak, because it is around the northern part of Kerala, and there's a lack of guile in the way people speak Malayalam there that really plays into the comedy of this film, including the way he keeps talking about his kundi, his butt being being
With the big bite out of it.
Yeah, the dog, and like his like partner is so stressed about the fact that he's got no butt anymore, and then like the lawyer comes in and is like, you can't write ass in the court statement, you have to say the Sanskrit word, so he like changes into the Sanskrit word, and so the comedy is so much in the language. So I do think it's so interesting that despite the language barrier, you guys found it so comedic still.
Yeah,
and even little details, like we learned that when he was a thief, he would always take books. Like these little details.
He takes he steals law books, and so he's read them.
Well, no, except the camera pans down and you see these books holding up the table next to the father-in-law's bed, and the lawyer's like, well, at least you found a use. There's a use for everything. But these little details, yeah, it was just not unsurprising that this would end up being a very popular film this year.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it.
So
overall, I think it was a really strong year for Malayalam cinema. Be it blockbusters and much smaller films, some that came straight to streaming. But I just feel like we're in this period right now where there's just so much creativity in Malayalam cinema. We can everything from really mass movies to more cerebral films, and there's everything in between. So Katherine, I cut you off. Well, you were about to say something else about this film.
Well, I was going to give some recommendations. Following Natan Case Kodu. So I'm going to recommend that you go see I'm sorry, Harsha. I'm going to need your help. Aniyati Pravo.
Aniyati Pravo, yeah.
Perfect. Which is it's
his debut
first film. His debut film, directed by Fazil, father of Fahad. And you've mentioned how that film made a sensation. It's a film that appears in Om Shanti Oshana, and it's lovely, and it is available. It's out there with subtitles. And Kajagopapa also has Aryappa coming to streaming very shortly. I'm really looking forward to that, but it's again a warning that it's very much a festival film. It spent the year on the festival circuit. It's not getting a theatrical release, and the subject matter looks very dark and difficult. But again, an actor who is very much trying to broaden the direction of what he does.
And that's something to admire. I mean, I do admire that very much. Go ahead, Harsha.
If you like the chaotic weirdos in this film, I think Amen is definitely one you should check out, because it's got the same level of weirdo characters and different, not a courtroom drama, but definitely the tone is a little bit similar.
Yeah.
And Lijojo Spelisheri is the father of a lot of these kinds of films that are becoming sort of mainstream in Malayalam. A lot of these directors are very inspired by him.
Yeah. Some of these, the humor and whatever reminded me of Amen, with like all of the different characters, which is not necessarily my favorite film of his, but yeah, it has a lot of all of these quirky people surrounding the main character.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely loved having both of you on. I hope this won't be the last time. I'm twisting Katherine's arm. We'll see. It's been a while that I've been trying to convince her to come on, and I'm so pleased, Harsha, that you were able to come on too, because I want everyone to check out your podcast and check out Katherine's blog. There will be just links in the description of this video. But this was a great year for Malayalam cinema. I'm glad you both could be here to help me celebrate that and point me to some great films that I have missed and that I need to see. And I really appreciate both of you being on today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Melanie.
I hope you enjoyed the series of 3 videos with Harsha and Katherine. Look for the link to their podcast in the description below.